Are you more or less optimistic about the injuries this year than you were in 2022? And then Gilbert, you were on the Ram speed in 2022. So how does the injuries that we've seen already compare in week one compared to what we saw, where you saw covering the team in 2022?
I kind of want to say they're worse this year because than that year because I think it took maybe 5 or 6 weeks before Cooper Cup got hurt, or 7 or 8 weeks before Matthew Stafford got hurt. So for the non-offensive linemen, it took a while before the injuries started piling up. If I'm not mistaken, here, as I see one bar on my Wi-Fi, damn you Wi-Fi. Hopefully, I'm okay, Victor. But yeah, and then I don't know. We already talked about this and we already made this joke, but Joe Noteboom is always freaking hurt. He was hurt in 2022 too. Uh, that's why we're a bunch of players that came in. I remember I might have
Yeah,
been a
one
week
of those
two.
players, by the way, Gilbert, one of those players that they signed to the practice squad was also someone you actually talked to because he finished out the season at left tackle, and that
Oh,
is Nishki, Ty Nishki. Is that how you say his name?
yeah. I remember his name. That's the same season where Larry Jackson got a lot of opportunity because of the injuries, and Jackson was holding it down. Coleman Shelton was holding it down for injuries. So yeah, I remember. I think it might have been in week two. They were playing the Falcons, and there was just like a bunch of injuries. And this year, it happened in week one. So I'm trying to keep track. But when you lose Puka Nacua, that definitely hurts. There, you lose Steve Avila. That's gonna hurt because it creates a lot of shuffling. Now you're down to your third string left tackle. But the good news is that Jackson's gonna come back next week. I shouldn't forget about that. So maybe it's not as a dire situation on the offensive line, but we'll find out about Rob Havenstein too for this week. But man, it's just that game last week where they had like 4 or 5 injuries on the offensive line, and now you hear all about the IR situations. But we're gonna get into it. But it's not as easy. Like for most teams, sometimes I kind of have the easy way out. I'm like, oh, you're not gonna have that player. Then you're gonna lose all these games. But the way that the Rams showed heart and fight, you know, on Sunday Night Football, it should not be as simple as who are you going to have this week and who you're not going to have this week. So there are some positives here, but it's not looking good for injuries. The injuries suck, and you want to see Puka Nacua on the field, and it could be 4 games, could be 5. Who the heck knows? But that's the problem too, Victor. We're like they kind of might have rushed Puka Nacua for week one, and then he
Yeah.
aggravates the injury, and maybe that's what Sean McVay's saying. Like, you know what? I'm not even gonna put a timeline, man. That's how we got in trouble the first time. So, yeah, it's not ideal, but we're gonna also discuss it. But seeing Cooper Cup turn back the clock, you have Matthew Stafford. You have a defense that pretty much balled out with the way they perform in Detroit. So there are some positivities, but just those 3 players. I don't even count Noteboom. Noteboom, stay healthy, man. Come on. That's you find yourself out of the league very quickly when you're not available after a while. But Avila and Puka Nacua definitely hurts.
Yeah, I just wanted to you get your perspective because you were part of that season and it was a long season. It was your only year on the beat, but that I'm sure that was a pretty blue like gloomy locker room every week as the injuries kept piling up. But I think for this question, and I'll answer it this way, Gilbert. I think I would be more optimistic even listening to you just because this is a way younger team back then in 2022. It was a much older roster, so a lot of the injuries you didn't have a lot of depth behind it. It was a top heavy roster. I think this is a more well rounded roster. One of the things, and then the injuries that are happening to two positions that we talked about that we thought they had really good depth on. That was the offensive line and then the wide receivers. I think and then we'll get into Puka Nacua and the injury as you talked about in terms of who's gonna need to replace that production. But in terms of the roster and being optimistic about the injuries, I really am just because as we talked about, I think this is like a much younger team. And then we saw that against the Lions had, I just when I started seeing all the injuries against the Lions, I just thought, oh man, they're gonna get they're going to get destroyed in this game. They're down 70-3. This is going to turn into, a rout. And the fight that they showed, it just, because they have a lot of young players on this team, I'm more optimistic about them being able to handle the injuries and the fact that it's happening early. And then one more thing, Gilbert, to kind of keep in mind is I know everybody was talked about the bye being early this season and how that was not a good thing. It might have been a blessing now because it allows you to have an extra week to get a lot of those guys it, back. Maybe they're back by that Raider game in week 6. So it might have worked out having that bye early in the year.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the schedule now. So they have the Cardinals this week. They have the 49ers next week. The week after that, the Bears, and then the Packers. So yeah, that's where the bye week comes in. And by the time they come back from the bye week, Puka Nacua and Steve Avila are able to come off IR. So yeah, it could be 4 weeks or 5 weeks, but if it's 5 weeks, then that's okay because there's a bye week, like you mentioned. They get to play the Las Vegas Raiders, and we're going to discuss this week's game, but it seems like a 50-50 battle. So, they could definitely win without those guys. The one that's definitely going to look like a difficult task is the 49ers, and that's
Yeah.
at SoFi Stadium from the home
Yes.
home
Open.
opener there. The Bears look, pretty terrible, so maybe that one's easy, but that's in Chicago, so it could be a little tough. And then you got the Packers where you don't know because you might get Jordan Love or you might not. The Packers are really trying hard to convince people there's a chance Jordan Love could play. So he might not play this week, but doing that and pushing that narrative maybe means Jordan Love could be back in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. So depending on how the schedule breaks, again, it's not as easy as that going win loss situation. But it could have been a worse schedule. The 49ers one kind of sucks. You want to see them at full strength. They look great on Monday Night Football, but it's not, totally, like an uphill battle, right?
Yeah, yeah, and like, yeah, that's some great points by you. I just want to get to the comments. We have our guy Manuel Correa joining says, "What's up, guys? It's good to hear from Manuel. I think he missed the show last week, and then joined us post game. He post show, I should say. He left some comments on there, so it's good to see him. And then when our strength and conditioning coach left, last couple of years have been hard, so." Yeah, I mean, it happens when you have a lot of coaching changes, especially strength and conditioning. That's always tough. And then he says, I think we can go 4-2, if not 3-3, until the bye would be good. So yeah, it's that bye now looks really good right now in week 5. As you get try to get your guys back healthy. But Gilbert, moving on in terms of you know, also talking about injuries here with Puka. How we talked about the offensive line, but how do the Rams go about replacing Puka's production while he's out?
Yeah, obviously you're gonna make Cooper Cup the focal point, but then when everybody knows that Cooper Cup is the number one wide receiver, and you have a whole week to prepare for that, like keep in mind the Detroit Lions were game planning for Puka and Cooper Cup, so all these motions, yeah, they were difficult to keep track of, but the Cardinals are gonna be ready for that for a whole game plan, knowing that Puka won't be there. So you got to have Tyler Johnson keep doing what he did in Detroit. Maybe you get Jordan Whittington more involved in the game plan because you could tell he wasn't a part of the game plan when Tyler Johnson came in and Demarcus Robinson was obviously getting his production too. But when you could maybe scheme it up for him a little bit, maybe he contributes. One thing that I know that you saw in the comments on our show for the post game show, where the heck is Tutu Atwell? That kind of tells me they have no interest in giving him an opportunity when it was
Yeah,
Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington. Uh, so yeah, that's why I always thought like, why are you giving this guy a roster spot? I've been done on the Tutu Atwell experiment. I'm definitely not seeing anything from him. So yeah, maybe they figure it out, but I'm not gonna I'm not gonna expect much there. Obviously, you could lean more in the running game with Kyron and maybe get Blake Corum a carry. How about that? You
yeah,
drafted the guy for a reason.
yeah,
So yeah, sometimes when you have all these injuries on the offensive line, you make life easier when you have better running games. That way you kind of just focus on one thing and not on pass pro too much. So that's definitely gonna be something that's big there. But we saw in Detroit and always in Matthew Stafford's career, or even Sean McVay led teams, that you don't need to have a lot of star power to get production from the offense because The quarterback is very good, and then the play calls and the schemes and the game plan are usually very productive.
Yeah, and Manuel Correa says Jordantown. So yeah, he's with you in terms of Jordan Whittington. I think he's somebody to kind of keep an eye on. But I know we talked about, we wrote on the comments there when we were asked about Tutu Atwell. But one of the things I really forgot about, kind of going back, as you remember last season at the beginning of the year, Cooper Kupp was the one that was hurt. He was on IR for the first 4 games of the season, and Tutu Atwell has had his best games when Cooper Kupp. I think if you give him, he's going to have a bigger role now going forward with Puka out. But we'd like to see him take that next step. You shouldn't be, having to be forgotten once those guys are back. He should be part of the rotation. But hopefully now that Puka is out, he can contribute kind of like he did those first couple of games against the Seahawks. I think he went for over 100 yards against the Seahawks in game one. So you like to see that production go up now with him, with Puka being out.
Yeah, I totally forgot about Cooper Cup being out the first month of last season. So yeah, injuries have been an issue the last 3 years there, but yeah, it also depends on matchups. Like, the Cardinals don't have the Lions defense, so that's a good sign there. And we
Hmm.
all know about Sean McVay having a very impressive record against the Arizona Cardinals. So, I am a little higher on the Cardinals this year, but they're gonna be on the road, facing a good offense. It could be maybe like a sneaky kind of fun shootout here, but and that's the thing, like I'm calling it a shootout, knowing that Puka Nacua is not going to be there because I do have that much trust in Stafford, being a gamer and Cooper Cup, especially what he did last week, making the most of his opportunity. So, yeah, these motions and pre-snap shifting it could definitely cause a headache for even the best defenses. And when Jonathan Gannon's defense still hasn't shown too much signs of improvement, that could be a long day there when you're dealing with all that because yeah, it's hard to keep tabs on all these motions.